So I request Mr. G.M.Kapur, State Convenor of West Bengal. He is going to share about the management of heritage.
Good afternoon. Um, Good afternoon, Chairman, MS, and all the dignitaries present here. All my friends are telling me that my time is already over. However, in a lighter vein, where's Dr. Suresh? Anyway, my subject is rather drab. It's not as illustrated as what the others have shown. I'm essentially going to speak on what I had said, management of heritage, but it's not management of a day-to-day manner, but it's more of, I think, what Malvika ji mentioned, the legislation which is very necessary to be able to manage heritage. The heritage of the past is the seed that brings forth the harvest of the future. I think if we remember that, we will learn to value our heritage more. The discovery in 1920s of the Mohenjo-daro and Harappan sites from the 3rd millennium BCE brought to light the hidden treasures of the Indus Valley civilization. But the local population was not particularly enthused nor involved in this exercise. Then they did not show great enthusiasm about having one of the greatest archaeological wonders of the world nearby. Such was the indifference to the value of this priceless heritage that civil contractors removed bricks for the constructing of railway quarters in the vicinity and for use as ballast while laying railway tracks nearby. Of course, it speaks volumes for the brick making technology which our ancestors had. So it is actually, people in India have many other priorities in their lives, such as hunger, health, habitation, education, and employment, before they can consider looking after heritage and culture. This is reality and must be accepted. However, even in the section of the population which should be expected to be more concerned with these issues, the percentage of concerned citizens is rather low. Yet the role of an active citizenry is vital for heritage protection. We have had the colonial legacy, the Western concepts of preservation and and conservation, which were introduced by the British, such as the Indologist Sir William Jones, who founded the Asiatic Society, James Prinsep and Alexander Cunningham, who deciphered ancient Indian scripts, leading to a deeper understanding of Indian culture, and Lord Curzon, Viceroy of India, 1899 to 1905, who was instrumental in setting up the ASI under John Marshall. Many Indian luminaries such as Rakhaldas Banerjee were also involved. And heritage legislation was introduced during this period. It is not surprising that the definition of heritage and its categories were influenced by the colonial experience and subsequently guided by international charters. The majority of India's architectural heritage and sites are unprotected. Many unprotected heritage sites are still in use, and the manner in which they continue to be kept in use represents the living heritage of India. This heritage is manifest in both tangible and intangible forms, and in its diversity defines the composite culture of the country. Beyond its role as a historic document, this unprotected heritage embodies values of enduring relevance to contemporary Indian society, thus making it worthy of conservation. This living heritage also has a symbiotic relationship with the natural environment within which it originally evolved. Understanding this interdependent ecological network and conserving it can make a significant contribution to improve the quality of the environment. There has been a constant conflict between heritage protection and large scale infrastructure projects in India. Also, there's considerable impact on cultural heritage at the local level through urban development. Old parts of major cities are disappearing and being replaced by modern construction, which destroys heritage sites. Pressure from political interests, developers, and real estate lobbies also leads to destruction of heritage. Tourism is also a double edged sword. If not properly managed and controlled, it can cause more damage than gain. Tourist flows that exceed the carrying capacity of a site can cause irreparable harm. The central square of a tourist town all too easily changes from a place for daily life to a tourist market, causing conflicts between the ordinary life of the locals and needs of mass tourism. Originality and traditional ways of life disappear because the town becomes a tourist attraction. Many cities in India have already lost their cultural identities because of this. Now, heritage legislation in India is the most important thing which the governments have done over the years. But although there is a plethora of laws, it is the implementation of those laws which is the biggest problem. Do we in India really value our heritage? The answer to this is not a simple yes or no. While both the government and public are definitely becoming more aware of the need to conserve heritage, be it built heritage like monuments and buildings, environment, material heritage like art and artifacts, as well as intangible heritage like culture and traditions, there is a sizable part of the population whose priorities, as I had mentioned earlier, are different. They need to be sensitized to the fact that the heritage we speak about belongs to them, and hence they need to protect what is rightfully theirs. Organizations like INTAC are playing a very important role in not only creating this awareness, but also documenting both tangible and intangible heritage. As has been mentioned earlier, the Indian Constitution, at the conclusion of making it India's constitution, retired Supreme Court of India Justice Hansraj Khanna wrote, if the Indian Constitution is our heritage bequeathed to us by our founding fathers, no less are we, the people of India, the trustees and custodians of the values which pulsate within its provisions. A constitution is not a parchment of paper, it is a way of life and has to be lived up to. The founding fathers of the country recognized the importance of preserving India's rich and diverse heritage, which is why this aspect was enshrined in the Indian Constitution promulgated on 26 January 1950. Among others, duties for Indian citizens, Section 51A lays down the following. This is a duty, mind you, to value and preserve the rich heritage of our composite culture and to protect and improve the natural environment, including forests, lakes, rivers, wildlife, and to have compassion for living creatures. So, why do we need legislation to protect what belongs to us? We do not require laws to protect and preserve our personal possessions, but the concept of collective ownership is something which something such as heritage is still alien to us, hence the need for legislation. Without legislation, there can be no preservation. Legislation is the cheapest and most cost effective method of heritage protection. There is a lot of excitement when a palace, church, or great building is saved and restored, but we forget the larger picture, which is that restoration preserves only a few sites at tremendous cost and effort. But what happens to the thousands of other historic sites? They are totally unprotected and, in the absence of legislation, subject to destruction. Legislation cannot restore a building without cost, but it can do much more. It can stop the bulldozer. Here I quote our good friend, late Shyam Chanani, because this was a very much favorite quote of his, that legislation cannot restore a building without cost, but it can do much more. It can stop the bulldozer. Legislation is equally applicable for the protection of tangible as well as intangible heritage. India is a vast country with heritage at every corner. It is extremely difficult for the government to keep an eye on all of it. Hence, the involvement of local people in the conservation and protection of heritage is of paramount importance. And INTAC's role in heritage awareness creation is very important. That's why we are all, in fact, the army of the conscience keepers to the nation. which is what our founding fathers had in mind when they created INTAC. And we are indeed committed to the cause of preserving India's heritage. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for sharing such a pertinent topic.